So I believe what I'm going to attempt to perform today um, is by special request of space-time travel communication coordinates. Um, but as with all readings and renderings of space-time travel communication coordinate systems and uh, and acts of communication, there's a certain amount of indeterminacy and ambiguity of interpretation. Indeterminacy in that when one is regarding observation as communication, there is always the possibility that observation isn't intended as communication and is merely an arbitrary or accidental, if one likes those kinds of terms, result of an uncalculated and uncommunicatively provoked or communicatively motivated act of looking, hearing, seeing, and other forms of a perceptual, observation that belong, one could say, simply to the realm of phenomenon rather than to the realm of signification and semiotics. So, those ambiguities and indeterminacies, being pointed out, I'll still say or argue that this reading that I'm going to attempt here is, by special request of a particular, space-time travel communication coordinate signification, and I'll say something about the text that I'm going to be using and how I intend to use it and how it relates to the recent context of some changes that have been made in space-time travel communication, the major space-time travel communication coordinate system that I'm working with here. But I'm going to begin with this. And this text, I had been thinking about Eric Havelock as we've been going through the reading of David Anton's, reading and rendering of Aristophanes' version of the story of Oedipus, which has been, placed on hold for a couple of weeks now, as a result of the fact that I'm in the process of moving. I'm largely moved, relocated at this point, and I'm somewhat, getting back on track with the work that I do, for the YouTube page. But we still haven't returned to that discussion. But I was thinking about, Eric Havelock and that muse, who learned to write and therefore to read and write, and how that muse, relates to a number of pieces that I performed as verbal improvisations, and the act of verbally improvising around a reading, which is what this text began as. I want to address before I go on and say how it's going to be incorporated with my reading and performance or Aaron's reading and performance of that Pauline, Black lyric that Aaron's been manipulating in various ways in the changes that we've made to the space-time travel communication coordinate system, the major one, and that major one that involves two discrete series of playlists, a complex series of a playlist of a complex set of 40 items, and a playlist of a 300-piece set of in some way, shape, or form, simpler items. Although the way that we've offered, variety of systems of interpretation of both the 40 and the 360, may seem, far from being simple. In any case, I was thinking about verbal improvisation, and I was thinking about reading and writing, and then the way that Aaron again used those lyrics from the song Missing Words to talk about missing playlists and reorganized playlists. And so I wanted to combine this text with a kind of or perhaps create a confluence between this text and the process that grew out of the first reading of Missing Words as Missing Words that Aaron read prior to our reorganization of the space-time travel communication and coordinate system. So I'll say something about this text and how this text resulted first, and then I'll talk about the way that I want to perform it or attempt to perform it, and what that conflux represents. So first of all, this text began as a verbal improvisation responding to a poem by Cecilia Vicuña, and as I was reading that text, the text of that poem, I responded verbally by creating lines that responded in various ways to the various lines that I was engaged with in the act of reading. And so that moment, exists in this interesting before and after space in relationship to, Eric Havelock's, muse, either having learned or having, failed to learn to read and to write, and whatever, obstacles that muse might have had in those acts of learning and communicating and receiving, right, in all of those acts of listening and deciphering and decoding that belong to these various moments in the history of language, whether they're strictly oral or textual or combinations of both, right? So I was reading and decoding Cecilia Vicuña's poem and simultaneously, but not speaking, my reading and decoding, rather inventing and creating a response, as I read through the work, and then this moment that's represented here is a transcription of that improvisation. So another act of listening to the product, right, of my reading through her work and responding verbally, and then of course changes and transformations necessarily occur in understanding and listening to my own rendering, right, of that verbal performance. And so I'm sure that this is not an entirely accurate and one-to-one correspondence of that verbal improvisation and the transcript that belongs to this text, right? So So that, in itself is an act of interpretation, a reading and a recording that involves transformations and the organization, right? Both into of the verbal performance, both into lines, and into sentences, and provided with punctuation, which represents textual rendering of the way that the language is organized, verbally as it's performed, right? So a lot going on in the transformation of that performance into the text to begin with. So then we have this text, and what I thought I would do with it in relationship to Aaron's performance of missing words is a kind of collaboration, and taking the form that Aaron invented and transforming it further. So Aaron's invention in the reading of Pauline Black's lyric missing words was to take the title missing words and to perceive that title or conceive that title as a kind of acrostic. And so what Aaron would look for, say that he began here on this line, I watched you twist and wind, or perhaps wind, though I think the more conventional reading would be wind. So the M in missing words would belong here, and the I would belong in this second line, and Aaron would look for words that began with M, and if there were none, he would say missing words, it's just. And he would say that as many times as he encountered a line that had no M. And you notice that there is no M here, so Aaron would say missing words, it's just, and then he would look for words that had an M in this line, and you would see that there are none. So he would repeat missing words, it's just, and then he would come to this line, and he would say simply, because simply has an M, and then he would go on to the I as an acrostic representation, and he would say, I invited, and then that's all he would say, because there are no other words that have an I in them. And then he would go on to the S, and he would say speech here, and then he would look for another S, and there isn't one, or there is one, so he would say publisher here, and then he would look for an I here, and he wouldn't find one, so he would say, missing I words, it's just, and then he would say inspiration, and I won't go on through the entire poem, but that was the form, which was also a method that Aaron developed to read, or to create, the performative enactment of missing words in the lyric missing words. And one of the lines. There were some other formal devices or formal rules, that Aaron invented along the way, including repetitions. And one of those repetitions involved the repetition of the word care. I believe it was 5 or 6 times. And that care, kind of really stood out for me in Aaron's reading of missing words as missing words. And perhaps, you could even say missing words as missing words as missing words. But in any case, whether, one imagines that performance of Aaron's is metapoetic, within 2 or 3 embeddings or not, isn't really consequential. What becomes consequential in the reading is is the care that that Aaron takes, to orchestrate, this form, and then the function, right, of the performance as a kind of like pedagogical tool in motivating like the perception of readers and the comprehension of readers to look for innovative or challenging ways in which a kind of poetics of invisibility, right, or a poetics of what's missing can be enacted, and what's missing, can be relocated or drawn back into presence if one takes the care, to define and trace the formal method itself, and then to sort of archaeologically, one could say, locate the textual values that might have preceded the performance of the text. In this case, the lyrics as they're originally performed by the selector, particularly by Pauline Black's rendering of these lyrics, right? So all of that is going on, and I was drawn to this this repetition of the care. So what I thought I would do is improvise around this again, utilizing this text, which itself is a rendering of a verbal improvisation, as the starting point for a rendering of this piece again, but adding the care as it seems to want to emerge in various moments of this new textualization of that verbal performance, or as it wants to emerge in this moment now, in which I'm rereading this textual variation of that initial verbal improvisation. I watched you care, I watched you twist and wind with care the threads of belonging you cared to call words. I cared to watch you because, simply said, I cared that I was never invited to hear the care of this moment. They care to begin in the loom of speech, whose last breath your publisher carried just one moment ago. In the care of her lament for loss, of the care inspiration provided her beloved lyric muse. But I, once again, since we care now again to speak of the care of dependency upon such words within, I was never allowed to care, to sing song, form from care word thread into careful page. Because though cared for myself, not cared for blind, found myself among those caring blind to my carried presence as careful eye, from within sight carried sound and decipherable, carryable sentence. So I cared to sense the turning toward such a sentence of belonging within your care, the careful threadwork of your caring loom, your still careful spinning, dangling, careful spindle, and carried because the letters themselves of carriage within such a carried word never were allowed to care to speak, to care to say, to care to scream. I can only carry my hearing among the excised remainder of the other's care, dispossessed caring whether twisted to right in carriage or left. Into careful sentence, or simply cast torn and broken carriage onto the weaving room floor. They bleat not, nor do they roam, they neither pasture, nor do they offer their purest necks of careful sacrificial virtue to the demands of a caring giver who cares to take away, twisting her fingers to the carriage right or the carriage left. The carriage taker who returns in kind, who cares to twist her fingers to the left of the carriage, the cradle to the right of what became, because I could never care within such twist, such careful, nimble, and carefully delicate fingers, because I cared to know them not, because I had not cared to become them, because I had not been knotted within such care, the benefit of such nimbleness from the very beginning, careful, just as some care limited by exclusion, though carrying their lack of strength to burden them beyond carriage, to raise them, hold them, carry their care among themselves, who were excluded from the care of learning to speak in the careful language of uncaring stones. So in their careful threads I see and hear carriage within the twist and turn, the care the letters bear, into the loom, see and hear the care of death, the care of heart, the care of hearing, the care of reading. Read their stare in the care of star, read the care of hearing in the heart of death, read the dearth of carriage in the stare of heart, read the earth's care, the heart's careful death, the heat's careful reading of the red art, the date that care eats the tread of heart, the heart that hears the earth's care for heat, death, heart, hear, read, stare, star, care, hear, heart, death, dearth, stare, care, heart, earth, heart, death, heart, care, heat, read, red, care, art, date, eat, tread, heart, care, heart, and heart, care, But I also care to sense the edge of the indecipherable carriage almost within, ever almost caring, almost. The carriage almost allowed, to care almost allowed, almost included, almost cared for, almost carried from the whisper of dread and threat of the many uncaring or caring voices whispering the uncared or caring, the howling names of the dead. And belong these whispered caring words among the still forms from within the remainders, carried, uncarried, carriages. Art, star, reed, lead, carry, steed and stare, cared, have always already left behind their carriages. In the missing B words from the thread, in the B missing from the words within the thread of your promised belonging, your promised care, I hear the bleating of your because, I hear the creating of your care, I see to see the care and carriage within the letter, the blood of your beloveds, the craft of your care, and the eye missing from the threads of the words of your promised belonging. I hear the care unanswered in the letters of love, and the longing allowed to care and crease the letters to wander beyond their allotted limitations, their carriage within the literature of their laws of the literal, their see to see, their seeing in carriage and carry, the care that they take to be and become letters, however poorly formed, in the O's missing from the thread, in the O's missing from their care, in the care of your promised belonging, in the care I heard a gasp, in the care I see a circle scorned for its incompletion, in the care because someone has noted where the care of graphite or ink finds its terminus, fails to touch the origin of our caring or inception, where its beginning first touched utterance, into mark into marking into the orderly form demanded by our publisher from his position above the page, demanded in the erasure of our typos and our poorly formed grammatical markings, the care that we failed to take in the transcription of the words upon the page, marking into the orderly form demanded by our publisher from his position above the careful page, the carrying of pages, into the eye missing from the threads, the careful caring of your promised belonging. I intuit such care, the course, the way, the direction, the return, the care in the end, missing from the threads of your promised belonging. I smell the night, yes, smell the care of night, not see nor hear. Have you spent enough time caring in the wilderness, for the wilderness of night, to know and love the smell of careful and caring night? Cecilia. Into the careful G missing, into the care missing in the G from the threads of your promised belonging. I go on carefully, I gather care, I get, I growl. I create care because though I love the smell of night, I have not spent enough time within its careful secrets to forest, to know, to enough, to take, to care, to take care, to take care, to defend myself from within its scented scentings and sensing dens in the care taken to rid the text of its typos in this last and final stanza, the many typos that carefully present themselves, ignoring the caretaker, into the missing G from the threads of the promised care of belonging. I go, I gather, I get, I grow, because though I love the smell of night, I have spent enough time within its secret forests to know enough to take care, and defend myself from within its scented scentings and sensing dens. Into the G, missing from the threads of your promised belonging, I go, I gather, I get, I growl, because though I love the smell of night, I have spent enough time within its secret forests to know enough to take care and defend myself from within its scented scentings and carefully sensing dens.